Welcome back. Welcome to another edition of Nain Shorts. And we have a fun one today. Well, at least I find it very, very fun. It's a topic that we've been discussing recently about all the things that we learn in martial arts and where can we use them? How do we train to use them? We all know we have different drills, different exercises that we go about doing in whatever martial art, and we learn certain skill sets along the way while doing so. Now, some martial arts are very intricate and have a long history behind them, but once you transfer that into, say, a sport or even in real life situation, some of that stuff isn't necessarily as useful as others in those situations. Now, I'm not questioning whether or not we should learn those things. I'm really asking only, how do we make them useful? How do we take all those things that we have learned that may not necessarily transfer well into a different venue outside of the dojo, so they are able to use them, so we are able to then utilize them just off the cuff, any which way, anytime that we need them. And that's something that really strikes at what we teach, because for us it's always been about flow. It's spontaneous, it's real life, it's something that can't be duplicated once it happens. It just happened, it worked, or it didn't, and you go back to the writing board, or hopefully you're well enough to go back to the writing board if it is a real life situation. And I've been wondering about that. How do other arts, how do you instructors go about doing so? Now, the first thought that comes to mind is sparring. Sparring is a great way to start testing things out, trying different combinations and such. But certain techniques don't work in that setting. First of all, if you're sparring with gloves on, that eliminates a lot of the grabs and a lot of the things that you can do. Boxing gloves. If you're sparring with MMA gloves, yeah, you still have those holds, you still have those grabs, but some of them don't necessarily work in certain instances, especially if there's a size difference in the opponent. Those of you who do BJJ know very well that a 10-pound difference in your opponent drastically changes the way that you're able to perform the things that you normally can with somebody your size, which is why in many competitions they are weight classes, because that difference in weight does make a huge difference in how you're able to perform those things to an opponent that's unwilling to let you do those things. Now, when we cross that boundary into the real world, there are no weight classes, there are no referees, and there really are no rules into what you can and can't do. Laws being another issue altogether, but real life situation, you have to do what you have to do. But if you don't train it that way, if you don't train for things to come out spontaneously, then how will they in a real life situation? We can just hope that they do, and we can just do more training. But is there a way to bring that all together, start getting your students to whatever level they're at, to start utilizing everything that they do, whether they're aware of it or not? And this is something that we've been discussing for a long time, and recently an exercise came up that sort of, well, not sort of, it actually, we've tested it out a couple of times, and unbeknownst to the students, they start using a lot of the things that we've been learning. And there's stuff that you see in all martial arts. And what are those ideas or concepts that I'm talking about? Because at this point, they're not techniques as much as they are ideas. For example, ranging. You have different ranges. You have, for anyone who uses Filipino martial arts, you have largo, you have medio, you have corto, you have short range, you have in here, everything else that you can do. And for other ones, you describe them differently. There's the danger zone, there's the green zone, there's the red zone, there's the safety. All these things, all these different words really just means how far you are away from the opponent, which then gives you an idea of what techniques or what things you can use in that range. Then you have awareness, whether or not you're fighting this guy, is there somebody else over there? Are you getting tunnel vision because your adrenaline is so hyped up that you can't even hear what's going on around you? All these things are concepts and ideas that you have to pressure test in order to realize whether or not you're good at it. And that's what I think an exercise like this would develop. is that ability to then assess that individual and say, okay, this person needs to work on speed, this person needs to work on footwork. And yes, you can learn those things in sparring, but does it give you a full version of everything you've been learning up until that point? Or because it changes the way that you're practicing things, it limits, or it rather omits a lot of the things that you've been learning so far. Like, you can't use certain things, certain stances while sparring unless you modify them. And that's where that happens, the modifications that come along for that individual, because again, every person is going to be a little bit different. So I ask the question one more time: how do you go about getting your students to then start developing these ideas and concepts and using them in free flow, where they're not being directed to do something specific, where they're not receiving a attack from a certain side, is not a right cross, not a right punch, but just somebody who's just delivering whatever it is that they need to deliver at that time, as if it was a real fight, and the student responds with whatever comes out, and then be able to move from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, without necessarily having to think about what it is that's going on, but rather just let it come out, and then you can assess afterwards. The instructor, being the one knowledgeable, would be able to then direct that student in which direction they need to go to grow, to develop, and get better at what it is that they were trying to do. Seems like a lot, I know, but again, this is an idea, and the idea, of course, developed by the the mad scientist. I'm sorry. That name will always make me laugh every single time I see it. So thank you, Carlos, for that. I appreciate you so much, man. So he came up with this concept where in the midst of a sparring session, again, with as much safety as you can with a stick in your hand, and as we go through the drill, he calls out what part of the weapon you are supposed to be hitting with. And it's really that simple. That's it. It's a sparring. The other person is going to attack you randomly, and you're going to deal with it. But the instructor is going to call out whether it's going to be the tip and the puño. And I'm going to use Bob here to demonstrate that. So bear with me. You're going to hear a voice off to the side, and I'm sure by now you know whose voice that is. So when you have a moment, thank you very much. So confrontation starts. We're sparring puño, so you have to then use the puño and switch.
Puño. Tip. Puño. Puño. Tip. Puño. Tip. Puño. Good.
There we go. Now, obviously, Bob is a willing participant. He did consent to this, so he's okay. He wasn't harmed in the making of this video. Now, what was going on? He's a standstill object, so really we can't show you the full extent of this drill. But your opponent is moving. They're not just going to stand there. They're swinging a stick at you as well, which means if I'm trying to hit with the tip, and this is my range, but that stick is coming out, how do I then use the tip, if that's the instruction it was giving me, to hit this, or block it, or whatever it is that you do in your art? Well, I would have to use my free hand. Well, all of a sudden, because I'm focused so hard on just using a certain part of my weapon in flow, I have to stop this and then use the tip to hit that hand. Before then I can move on to the body. Or the next hand comes out, then I have to use the tip to do that as well.
I have an idea. Let's move Bob.
You ask.
Can we just go ahead and move him out of the way? We can talk about this. Hey, don't mess with my carpeting.
Alright.
So I'll be the dummy. I'll be Bob. But
Roberto.
Roberto. But in this sense, I will be attacking him, and just again lightly attacking. I'm not trying to kill him or anything, but again, the idea should be clear once you see it. So we're going. Now yell out, puño. tip, puño, tip, puño, tip, and good. It's on you.
Woo! Okay, that's a better demonstration. Bob, thank you very much. You've been usurped by yet another bald man. Actually, that's kind of funny. But this one's a lot livelier. And you guys have seen Rico and me play before, for those of you who have watched the episodes prior to this one. He's no slouch. He knows what he's doing, and of course at this point he was just being the uke. So he was just showing the attacks. He wasn't really trying to harm me. He could have stopped any of those anytime he wanted. But because now I have somebody swinging at me, I have to be very mindful of my range and what I have available at that time. For students who are a bit newer to the system, they would have to create space. So either pushing, pulling, grabbing, stopping, which means now all of a sudden, without them really thinking about it, they are forced to use their live hand, which in Filipino martial arts is crucial, especially at a closer range where you really need to utilize that empty hand to do everything else so the stick can do its job. It's more dangerous. So again, all of a sudden the student has to utilize something that they may not have been aware of, that they have trained separately in other exercises, but now they have to use it in a free flow, defending themselves and following the instructions of the instructor, which is another aspect to it where you have to be calm enough to be able to hear what is being actually said. When somebody's swinging at you, and I don't care who it is, a stick swinging at your face, your heart rate is going to go up. Even if you've been doing it for a long time, your heart rate still goes up slightly, especially if you've trained that person or you've trained with that person and you know how hard they can hit. Yeah, your heart rate goes up. And we all know that once it gets to a certain level, people get tunnel vision, you get brain fog, because now you're just in that survival mode. So it's a great way to then experience that of a real fight without actually being in danger of a real fight. Calm down, listen to instructions, focus on what's being said. All of a sudden, as you repeat this process over and over again, you start being more aware of other things. Where is his leg? Where are they putting their body? What's going on around you? Your brain calms down, and all these other concepts and ideas that we've talked about and that we preach about all of a sudden come into light and become a very real thing as you're moving around, as you're following instructions. I started doing, with Mapuño, it wasn't necessarily a strike, it started being hooks. Hooks being something that we found kind of difficult for some people to do in Filipino martial arts, mostly because they don't play at that range. Puño is a close range tool. You have to be right there in order to do so. So now all of a sudden I'm changing my range without realizing it because I'm following the instruction and not really thinking about, oh, what foot do I have in front? Did I land on my left foot? Did I land on my right foot? No. It's just, am I close enough? Is something in my way? Oh, do I want to hit or do I want to grab? Do I want to capture? All of a sudden now I have all these ideas that I can start using in real time, in a real situation where my adrenaline is a little bit higher, where I do feel like, hey, I feel some pressure, I'm not in danger, but it's still a stick flying in front of me. We found this to be a very useful tools, and it doesn't really matter at the level. Now, wouldn't be something you would do with a first day student, of course, and maybe not even a couple months in, but it is still fun to test out the students once they get a certain amount of knowledge to see where is their head, what's stuck in their minds, what do we need to revisit, and how do we then revitalize those lessons so then it becomes natural and then you do it again and you see it come out. Which is why we do sparring at the end of classes to see what stuck and what didn't. But is that the only way? This is our way. This is what we came up with for our students. What have you come up with for your students to be able to then use everything that they learned in your class, everything that you've learned in your martial arts, so it comes out freely, without having to take too much time to stop and think, without having to anticipate what's coming at you, where you just go, 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 and assess afterwards, because some stuff might work, some stuff might not. You're gonna miss, you're gonna mess up. But if you can keep on going, eventually the picture becomes clearer and clearer. At least that's been our experience. That's my personal experience doing this exercise. And I hope there are more exercises like that for all kinds of martial arts, so students can become proficient in moving the way they need to move for their needs at that particular situation. Can't really train for everything, but we can train our minds to be ready for as much as we possibly can imagine, and hopefully take it even further than that, because the next generation hopefully is going to stand on our shoulders and go way beyond we could even imagine in the arts. So please like, share, subscribe, share your ideas in training and how you are able to get your students to then start doing it naturally and getting all the techniques and ideas that you fed them to come out, well, naturally. Thank you again for joining me on another one of Nain's Shorts. Till the next one, 3, 2, 1, cut!